There's a question that sooner or later, anyone who approaches the world of naturism asks themselves, why does something as simple as going without clothes generate such strong reactions? Why can the idea of taking off your swimsuit on a private beach cause anxiety, embarrassment, or even fear? And above all, why do millions of people consider it normal to show their bodies on social media, on television, or in advertisements, but find it unthinkable to spend a few hours in a naturist context? The answer is much deeper than it seems, and it probably has nothing to do with the body. Today, we will go beyond stereotypes, prejudices, and widespread beliefs to understand why naturism continues to scare so many people, even in 2026. But be careful. By the end of this video, you might discover that the fear of naturism isn't about naturism at all. What if I told you that most people aren't afraid to show themselves to others, but are afraid to truly see themselves? Stay until the end, because there's a psychological aspect that almost no one talks about, and that could completely change your perspective on naturism. If you're interested in the topics of personal freedom, the relationship with the body, and authentic naturism, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Here, we explore topics that rarely find their way into mainstream conversations. The real problem is not nudity. When naturism is mentioned, many people immediately imagine something strange, embarrassing, or even scandalous. But let's stop and think for a moment. Every day we see bodies everywhere. In movies, in advertising, on social media, in magazines, in marketing campaigns. Our society is constantly exposed to images of the human body. So why does a naturist beach arouse so much resistance? Because something different happens in naturism. You're not a spectator. You're the protagonist. You're not looking at someone else's body. You're experiencing your own. And this is where all the insecurities we normally manage to hide emerge. Fear of judgment. One of the most common fears concerns the judgment of others. Many people think, what if they look at me? What if they judge me? What if my body isn't beautiful enough? This fear is understandable. We live in a society that accustoms us from an early age to constantly comparing ourselves to others. Thinner, younger, more muscular, more attractive, more perfect. The problem is that this comparison never ends. And so we come to believe that our worth depends on our physical appearance. But those who actually frequent naturist environments often tell a completely different story. After a few minutes, physical differences cease to matter, because you realize a simple truth. Nobody's perfect, and nobody expects it. There is a huge misunderstanding about naturism. Many people imagine that naturist beaches are places frequented exclusively by people with perfect physiques. The reality is exactly the opposite. On naturist beaches, you meet people of all ages. Young people, elderly people, athletes, overweight people, families, couples, singles, different bodies, different stories, different lives. And it is precisely this normality that surprises those who arrive for the first time. Because for the first time, the body stops being a showcase. It simply becomes a body. At this point, I want to ask you a question. In your opinion, what is the real reason why so many people reject naturism? Is it a cultural issue, religious, educational, or is it simply fear of judgment? Leave it in the comments. I'm curious to read your opinion and compare it with that of other community members. There is another aspect that is rarely talked about. Many people are not afraid of naturism. They fear change. Every human being tends to feel safe in their own habits, even when those habits don't make him happy. Trying something new means dealing with uncertainty. And naturism, for those who have never experienced it, represents exactly this: an unknown territory, a different experience, a situation you can't completely control. For some, this feeling is stimulating. For others, it becomes a barrier. Many of the fears associated with naturism only exist before the experience. Those who have never visited a naturist beach tend to imagine extreme scenarios: embarrassment, discomfort, strange situations. But those who really try often say something very different: silence, relaxation, respect, normality. This does not mean that naturism is suitable for everyone, but it means that reality is often much less scary than the images our minds create. If this topic is making you think, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the growth of this community dedicated to freedom, respect, and information about naturism, tell your friends. You will help bring forward independent content that rarely finds its way into traditional media. There is an interesting paradox. Many people claim to want to be free. Free to express themselves. Free to live as they wish. Free not to be judged. Yet they are often the ones who feel blocked by the idea of showing themselves for who they are. Naturism, in its deepest sense, is not about the absence of clothes. It's about the absence of masks. This is why it can be so powerful, and at the same time, so scary. Because it confronts us with a fundamental question: how comfortable are we really with ourselves? And now we come to the most important part. Perhaps naturism is scary because it eliminates many of the barriers we hide behind every day. Social status, fashion, brands, appearance, roles, everything fades into the background. What remains is the person. And this can be surprisingly difficult because it forces us to confront something we often avoid: our authenticity. Maybe the right question isn't, why is naturism scary? But what are we afraid of discovering about ourselves? Because when we listen to the testimonies of those who have overcome that initial barrier, the same story often emerges. The fear was enormous before, much smaller after. And this applies not only to naturism, it applies to many life experiences. The greatest fears are often those that exist only in our imagination, while reality, once experienced, turns out to be much simpler, more human, and normal than we had believed.